Paint Care is all about keeping it simple for district residents. They make recycling leftover paint easy with convenient locations like your local paint store. Paint Care has 3 simple rules for painting smarter and reducing waste. 1, buy the right amount of paint for the job. 2, use up what's left. And 3, recycle the rest. Visit paintcare.org/3simplerules to learn more, or find a paint drop-off site near you.
Today on CityCast DC, I'm here with City Paper's Mitch Ryals and my CityCast colleague Julia Karen. And we are talking about the fallout from a police shooting, a battle between a strip club and an investment bank, and the opening of a controversial memorial in the heart of downtown. Today is Friday, September 13th. I'm Michael Schaefer, and here's what DC is talking about. Hey, if you're new here, welcome. As you may have heard, CityCast is your daily podcast that gives you a way to connect with your city. We talk about politics, we talk about arts, we talk about neighborhood spats, we talk about things that will help you lead your best life here. And we also have a bunch of commercials, and if you don't want to hear them, you can sign up to be a member. It's only $8 a month. Just go to membership.citycast.fm. It'll be pretty awesome. Hey, Julia, how's it going?
Hey, Mike, how are you?
Good. Mitch, welcome.
Thank you. Good to see you both.
So you have been covering like a pretty jarring story, the police shooting that took place at the beginning of the month. There was some fairly large protests earlier this week. For people who haven't been following it, can you start at the beginning, the shooting?
Yeah, absolutely. It was September 1st, the early morning hours of September 1st, the Sunday. DC police responded to reports of a driver who had sort of crashed into the building of a McDonald's on Marionberry Avenue Southeast. When they arrived, according to police, the driver was unresponsive, still in the driver's seat, still in the vehicle, and they saw a firearm, they say, on his lap. More police arrived, first responders are there. This is all according to the body camera footage, which eventually got released. But they're basically, for about 10 minutes after they arrive, they're sort of clearing everyone out of the parking lot, away from the drive-through lane, and essentially discussing how to handle the situation. At which point, the driver, his name is Justin Robinson, was 26 years old, begins to wake up, regain consciousness, and that's sort of when, according to the body camera footage that we see, the police kind of jump into action, and it's a matter of seconds, maybe about a minute, between when Justin regains consciousness and the police shoot and kill him.
So this happened on September 1st. About a week later, I guess, the body cam footage is released. And what does that show about the actual shooting?
So the footage in the actual shooting, it shows there are officers surrounding the car. There's no one else in the car. It's just him in the driver's seat. There are 2 or 3 officers sort of huddled around the driver's side, like sort of talking to him, really shouting at him all at once through the driver's side window, which he eventually rolls down. There's other officers on the other side. They're yelling at him to put his hands up, don't touch the gun, put your hands up, don't touch the gun. They say that over and over. Fairly quickly or simultaneously as they're shouting these orders, one officer sort of sticks his firearm through the window with his right hand and appears to be reaching into the car with his left. It's sort of unclear to me if he's reaching, trying to get the door handle to open the door from the inside, or if he's trying to grab the gun that they saw on Justin's lap. But in any case, as he sticks his firearm through the window, the officer, Justin, sort of grabs or swats at it, and that's when they open fire on him.
You said earlier about the gun in his lap. You said they say he had a gun in his lap. Is there doubt about that? Are there people who say that might not be the case? Does it not show up on the video?
I can't see the gun on the video. The police say that he had the gun and that Justin had the gun in his left hand, and officers were yelling at him to drop it. And as they opened fire, you can see they say the gun fall into his lap from his hand. It is unclear to me, however, if the gun was in Justin's hand or was in the officer's hand as he was trying to perhaps take it from him or retrieve it.
So who was this guy, Justin Robinson? Like, what was his deal?
Right. Justin Robinson, 26-year-old. He was a violence interrupter in the Attorney General's Cure the Streets program. That is a sort of violence prevention program that the AG has one out of their office. The mayor's office has its own program. They are essentially people from the community where they work who know the community well, know the people there, and are dispatched to squash beefs, I guess to put it simply, to prevent violence before it happens.
After the shooting, there was vigil. There was calls to release the video. There was some speculation that, what if the police doctor the video? Then the video came out, and that led to more protests and disturbances and a bunch of arrests and some attempted burglaries. What were the targets of the protest? Like who was the protest against, and where did it take place? And I was surprised to see people at City Center, D.C.
After the footage was released, there was some, I guess, looting, for lack of a better word, property destruction, burglary that went on in pockets throughout the city, including, as you mentioned, the downtown city center, the Gucci store, I think people broke into, and some other sort of high-end retailers were targeted. 5 or 7 people were arrested, I think I saw. So
what's the thought now on whether or not MPD followed protocol? Has Pamela Smith said anything about this?
They, as they typically are, were tight-lipped when reporters were asking questions about the specific shooting. The incident is under criminal investigation and under internal investigation. So the U.S. Attorney's Office for D.C. will decide whether 2 officers fired the weapons. So USAO will decide whether those 2 officers should be charged criminally. And then MPD will determine in its internal investigation whether their actions were in line with department policy and whether they should be punished or fired even in some way.
All right, so I've got sort of 2 questions here, sort of about where we go from here. One is procedurally, what are next steps? The USAO, that's the U.S. Attorney, obviously has to make a decision on charging, but in terms of police internal procedures, in terms of where the officer is now, can you just sort of give us the, according to the rules, what should happen now? And then secondly, the big question I've got, and I don't know what you guys, my sense has been that the DC, the Metropolitan Police Department, has this is not some Ferguson, Missouri, horrible department, but like any police force, it is, you're always sort of one bad decision away from doing something terrible. Sort of where the city politics of this go in terms of public's view of the MPD's relationship with the community, and so on.
Right. So procedurally, So there will be a decision on whether criminal charges need to be filed against these 2 officers, and I should say that under law, MPD is now required to identify the officers involved, and they are Officer Brian Gilchrist and Officer Vasco Mateus. Officer Gilchrist is the officer who stuck his firearm through the window, and he fired, I think we were told, about 10 rounds, and Officer Mateus fired 1 round, a single shot. Both of those officers are now on paid administrative leave, as is, in accordance with MPD's policy as these investigations play out. In other words, they're not patrolling the street. They're, I don't know if you'd call it desk duty, but they're not out on the street. They can't make arrests. Their police powers, I believe, have been revoked for the time being. And so MPD's decision, the USAO's decision point is criminal charges or no criminal charges. MPD's decision could range from, these officers need more training, to a fine or suspension, to termination, essentially. As far as the politics of the situation, Justin's position and role as a person who was paid by the city to prevent violence sort of adds a wrinkle to this.
And I would imagine that him apparently having a gun in his lap also adds a wrinkle to to the ongoing conversation about violence interrupters and whether that's a useful program.
Correct. Yeah. And what the responsibility of those people paid by the city is, right? I mean, I would imagine the AG's office would say, well, we don't really want our violence interrupters carrying guns. On the other hand, I think, by the very nature of their work and who they are and the credibility they bring to that work, many of them in those roles would push back against that. I think that there's a pretty strong sense among that set of folks who believe that they need to be armed to protect themselves. They're not out here using these firearms to commit crimes, but they would maintain that they need these weapons to defend themselves.
We have an episode actually next week coming out about violence interrupters, so stay tuned for that.
I've got some exciting news for you theater lovers across DC. The Peabody Institute of the Johns Hopkins University is going big to celebrate 1 year of performances at the Bloomberg Center, DC's newest venue for music and dance. They're putting on a bunch of free shows this fall. I'm talking orchestra, jazz, and opera performances, all presented by talented Peabody faculty, students, and alumni. So for example, at the end of September, I'm really excited about the Polyaspora Festival, which centers Black and Brazilian perspectives in contemporary music. Or in October, there's the Democracy Day show. It's all happening at 555 Pennsylvania Avenue. And again, believe it or not, this is all free. But tickets are required, so explore the full concert calendar and reserve your spots now at washingtondc.jhu.edu.
So why in the world does Hugo, a quiet postal clerk, keep getting married? Based on a true story, the 22-plus Weddings of Hugo Multiplay is a raucous tale of a beautiful crime that delves into several hidden themes of our day, from empathy and immigration to love in times of hatred and the universal need to find refuge in a place, person, or a feeling. 22 Weddings is a lot. I definitely want to know what Hugo is thinking. The play premieres at Gala Theater in Spanish with English surtitles. It runs from September 5th to 29th. Learn more and get your tickets at galatheater.org. That's GALATHEATRE.org. All right, so Julie, you have your eye on a much less heavy civic controversy this week. And if there's two words I know sell stories, it's JP Morgan and strip club.
God, I hope so. All right. So for people who don't know, JP Morgan Chase has a section of a building in DC. They are at the Bowen Building at 875 15th Street Northwest. And coming up, they're supposed to have a new next door neighbor. That neighbor is Iraklion. I'm not entirely sure how to pronounce it, but it's a club. And it recently got approved to transfer its liquor license to 1412 I Street Northwest. So they share an alley. They share Z Alley. It's spelled Z-E-I. There's a whole filing for this transfer. Basically, JP Morgan Chase is miffed about this place being next to them. They say it would cause like disturbances and stuff like that. What they're really mad about is the potential of the nude dancing. And if I'm a JP Morgan Chase finance bro, I actually thought that would be a plus.
But wait, can I just, if you're not inside the building, is there any difference between a strip club and any other sort of restaurant or bar in terms of its impact on a neighborhood?
Not really. I mean, the people who are trying to get Iraklion set up, one, they haven't said explicitly that nude dancing is going to be part of the club. So right now it's just a club. There's potential for nude dancing to be a thing. And they also have said basically that again, it may or may not offer it at this time based on the pending legal issues, like JP Morgan Chase, because they're suing, is saying actually, please don't do this. But DC and zoning regulations have basically said that nude dancing alone doesn't make an establishment a sexually oriented business establishment. And nude dancing is not one of the, quote, specified sexual activities listed in the zoning definition. So the establishment offering nude dancing is not compromising its zoning purposes, which is interesting.
I mean, so their problem is they think this will cause chaos. And I mean, they're saying this will cause chaos, crime, etc. I don't get it. In that neighborhood, already, I mean, it used to be like the epicenter of like porny activity in Washington, but it's still, I mean, on K Street, there's a couple of strip clubs. And I mean, like during the day, these are sort of dreary establishments in the sense that like they don't add vibrancy to the neighborhood, though I imagine people come and go at night. Isn't like a back alley in the sort of office part of downtown like precisely where this sort of thing ought to be?
I mean, yes. And fun fact, there was a club here before, like 25 years ago. This exact building, it hosted Club Z 25 years ago. There's a whole article about this old club. The headline is "Place to Z and Be Seen." Excellent headline. Excellent pun. One of my favorite sections from this article, from the Post, from I think it's 1992, is the third level is a members-only caviar bar and lounge with its own doorway, stairwell, and Z Privé keycard entrance, so you can be electronically announced, which is more impressive than making an entrance from a concrete stairwell, but not quite so satisfying as being recognized for your importance. So this place has already been a club.
Wait, so what happens now? Like, can a office building owner, like under our system, do they have the ability to stop or object to, some business they don't like being nearby? And are they going to succeed at that?
The short answer is JP Morgan Chase is appealing ABCA. That's the Board for Cannabis and Alcohol Control. They're appealing the decision that said that Heraklion can stay. The guy who is leading this charge for the transfer of this nightclub is this guy, John Fiorito. He's got 25 years of experience in hospitality and has approximately opened like 100 nightclubs and bars and restaurants and large hotel resort operations. Heraklion has said that they're going to soundproof their walls on the inside so there's no disturbances, but all JP Morgan Chase can do right now.
Do strippers make a lot of noise? Like sound is not the is not the sense they're complaining about.
It's the nudie parties, right? That's the issue. I mean, and again, Heraklion hasn't said like, yes, we are at this moment going to offer nude dancing. It's the possibility of the nude dancing that has JP Morgan Chase spooked.
So you guys, what jumps out at me in this is like, there's all this talk of like, we're going to convert office buildings, disused office buildings to residential. We're going to try to turn downtown into a residential hub. This is the kind of like sniffing about a business that happens in residential neighborhoods all the time. I don't want my children to walk past a strip club, et cetera. That kind of NIMBYism is much more associated for obvious reasons with like, I live here than with, my office is here. So I feel like this is like a trial run for something we're going to see a lot more of if this idea of making downtown residential actually takes wing.
Yeah, I mean, but if you look at this on a map, like this is right on top of McPherson Square and Franklin Park and Lafayette Square. Like this is as downtown as you're going to get. And one of the things that Fiorito and co have said is like, this is downtown. Like, and ABCA has said, if you're downtown, you should expect some noise at reasonable hours occasionally. Now, at like 4 a.m., maybe not. But at like midnight, if you're coming from a club, yeah, it's going to be noisy. And that is the price you pay for living downtown. Like we've seen in Chinatown and a Gallery Place that like people are big mad about the fact that they are downtown and it's really noisy after like a Capitals game or you've got a bucket drummer at like 10, 11 p.m. That is one of the costs of living downtown. Mitch, I don't know if you're the kind of person who goes downtown and is annoyed by such disturbances.
I go downtown not as often as I used to when City Paper's offices were actually right around the corner from this.
Right.
But I still go occasionally, and you could say that I go downtown specifically to be among this commotion and shenanigans. You put your finger right on the button. One of my favorite quotes from the ABCA, I think it was an ABCA ruling.
Yep.
Recently was something like, people working in like existing downtown should expect some level of noise, which just sort of sums up perfectly almost any similar type fight in the city.
So lately, the weather in DC has been downright wacky sometimes. Tornadoes, crazy flooding, bad air quality, so much of it feels out of control. But I recently learned that September is National Preparedness Month, and it is a good reminder to make your emergency plan if you haven't yet. The yearly preparedness campaign was started by the Federal Emergency Management Agency, or FEMA, and they have a bunch of tips on their website to get you started. It's ready.dc.gov/NPM 2024. One of the best ways to prepare is to make sure you have a way of staying informed, not just by listening to CityCast DC. Sign up for free email or text alerts from district officials on weather, traffic, public safety, and more by visiting alert.dc.gov. Another tip, build your emergency kit over time. Purchase one extra item each time you shop. A checklist is available at ready.dc.gov/kit. Take time now to prepare because later is too late. Everything you need is at ready.dc.gov. So just a couple of blocks away from this possible strip club, another really different and super interesting to me controversy, there's a World War I memorial there. It's been there for a few years, but the final piece of it, which is this massive 60-foot sculpture, is going to be inaugurated tonight. And, you know, World War I was like Vietnam, like a very controversial war, right? Like huge parts of the American public were always against it. Presidential candidate Eugene Debs was imprisoned for opposing it. And after it, for 20 years, it was thought of as this like stupid, ridiculous waste that we should never have done. So this memorial, it's taken a very long time to build it. This sculpture at the core of it is, for those of us, even if you don't care about World War I, for those who care about how Washington works and looks, it's a super significant change. The Vietnam Memorial, Maya Lin's Vietnam Memorial, is this famous minimalist structure. It's just, clean black marble with just the names engraved in it. This sculpture was the product of lobbying by a conservative organization called the National Civic Art Society. The head of it was eventually appointed by Donald Trump as the head of the Commission on Fine Arts that oversees DC architecture. Their belief is that we have erred in Washington and across the country by moving away from classical architecture, by embracing modernist architecture. They want to return to classical architecture, and this sculpture is thought of as a form of that. The one knock on it is that to some, it appears to glorify war. It's a sort of ultimately a heroic portrait, a series of a guy going to war and sacrificing. I think if you're going to honor veterans of a war, like people did sacrifice and it was painful and difficult. So without making any like aesthetic judgment on that, I do think that tension has been like super interesting in Washington. And this was sort of a win for the architecturally conservative side.
Yeah. I mean, the thing that comes to mind is like, do I prefer symbolism or literalism? And like, por qué no los dos? Like, I like both of them depending on the context. Like, I think the Vietnam War Memorial, where it's just like the stream of names and it grows and it grows and it grows, like, there is something to that. And then I think it's the World War II fountain, right? Like, it's every state circling this fountain. And like, I hate that. You hate it? I love it. That
memorial looks like, Achtung. Like, I don't, it's not, I don't know. Mitch, you guys watch zoning and development quite a bit. Where do you see this headed?
Ooh, the memorial doesn't bother me. I think it looks like a pretty realistic representation of, or at least one representation of what it looks like to go to war. And that may make some people uncomfortable, but tough.
Do you have a favorite?
A favorite memorial? What's the one where they're like walking through the jungle kind of and they have like backpacks on? Korean War. That's my favorite.
Yeah, it's weird. Like the other thing that's sort of been a dynamic in how Washington's shaped is like, in order to be a first-class citizen, your thing has to be on the mall. And there's been things where like for some of the new proposed museums, the government's like, how about this place on Independence Avenue right across from the mall that's even more convenient to Metro? And people are like, nope, it's like second-class citizenship if you're not on the mall. And this is in Pershing Park. It's not on the mall. It's on Pennsylvania. And in a weird way, it I think sort of shows again the weird shunted to the side thing of World War I in our history.
Yeah. And if you want more information on stuff like that, we have a full episode about the future of the mall and what monuments go where, because it is a limited amount of space. So should be interesting to see what happens in the future.
Well, Mitch, Julia, awesome to see you guys.
Thanks, Mike.
Likewise. Thanks for having me.
And before you go, it is National Preparedness Month. So every Friday we are sharing a tip from our sponsor, DC Homeland Security and Emergency Management Agency. Today's tip: prepare with your needs in mind. Your emergency kit may look different than a neighbor's. Download a checklist at ready.dc.gov/NPM 2024. And that is all for today here on CityCast DC. Our production team this week was Priyanka Tilve, Julia Karen, Ash Durbin, and Zoe Kulkin. Newsletter editor Kayla Cote-Stemmerman wrote our fabulous newsletter, Hey DC, this week. And our hosts are Bridget Todd and me, Michael Schaefer from Politico. Music is by Alex Roldan. If you enjoyed the show, why not propose your own CityCast memorial for downtown DC? We'll be back Monday morning with more news from around the city. Bye.